So my name is Tom Olijhoek. I'm editor-in-chief of the Directory of Open Access Journals. We list only open access journals of quality, and we are very careful to not include any predatory publishers and journals by these publishers. Susan Veldsman, the director of the publication unit of ASSAf in South Africa, will be talking about a recent initiative and a recent launch, very recent for yesterday, on how to combat predatory publishers and journals. And I will do a general introduction on what is going on. So what is going on? Yeah, there is publications that are called predatory publications and predatory publishers. And yeah, for the first time, it drew a lot of attention when John Bohannon put out a sting. He did some experiment where he gave some articles to journals and see if they accepted. And those articles were bogus articles, just fabricated. And many of the journals that he gave them to were accepting those articles. Unfortunately, all those journals that he gave them to were open access journals. And it gave the impression that open access journals would accept very bad articles and the subscription journals are in the clear, which is of course not true. It's not the way to do an experiment. But there is a problem of predatory publishing, and there is a problem of journals and publishers just there to gain money and not do anything else, not do peer reviewing, do nothing. But in this slide, you can see there is also big publishers with big names, Elsevier, Nature, that tells there is some cases that there is many articles being retracted because of bad quality. And that is found afterwards. So the peer reviewing in their system hadn't functioned either. Then the most recent investigation is a few years back by the ICU, where a lot of journals and well, there was a lot of investigation in who had published in predatory journals and articles. And this focused on Omix, a very well-known publisher, and also an organizer of conferences, that ASSAf. And that gave nice, interesting results that even very famous people had published in predatory journals. You can see it here. There is a lot of turmoil in these publications. It says thousands of Forscher publizieren in pseudo journals. That is a German journal saying that there is thousands of well-known scientists who have published in predatory journals. And so the problem was listed as an important problem. Here you see the website of one of those organizations, publishers that was investigated, ASSAf. And you can see, oh, there is many conferences, March, everything in March, Paris, Singapore, London. If you go there, and the people who investigated it, they went there, they found they were drawn in some small room somewhere with 5 people, and that was the conference. But they had paid a lot of money. So it looks very well, very nice as a big conference and event. But in fact, what they're doing is drawing money from people who don't know where they're going and think that they are going to receive very interesting information. And this is one of the most famous cases of a conference organizer, which is really a bogus organizer. So talking about the what, who, and the why of the predatory publishing, you need a definition. Everybody talks about predatory publishing, but what is it? It is a form of publishing where the predatory journals and publishers prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship. They also feed misleading information, and they don't do any editorial good practices or peer reviewing most times. There is also a lack of transparency on what you have to pay, what is going to happen when you submit your articles. And there is often very aggressive and indiscriminate practices to attract editors for their journals. So this definition has been published in Nature, and it was in 2019 after a conference in Ottawa, where I met with very many other people, stakeholders in the publishing business, and we decided on this definition. And it has been cited many, many times over since then. And I think it is good to have a definition, because if you don't have a definition, you cannot do anything against some practices. So what I really want to emphasize is that predatory publishing should not be linked automatically to open access. Of course, in open access, there is journals that are open, and you can see if there is a predatory practice going on. But there is so many subscription journals that you cannot access. And there is also many of those journals who do nothing and do no peer review and just earn money. So these are, to the same definition, also predatory journals. Only they are not as visible. Open access journals are very visible. And even a website dedicated to predatory publishing, this one, predatorypublishing.com, they implicate that open access publishers, there are legitimate publishers and there are predatory publishers. But it's not a problem just of open access. That is a misunderstanding. Look at the picture. You know all scopers and Web of Science who list journals that are trustworthy and have a good reputation. But there are only 30,000, perhaps nowadays, 40,000, 35,000 of the 100,000 known journals that are listed in those indexes. It means that we don't know anything about 70,000 journals that publish science. And many of those are low quality, and many of those just publish because they want to earn money. So there is predatory publishers among those. Also, for open access, you can say there is about, at the time now, 40,000 perhaps open access journals, and we list 18,000 that has been checked and that are not predatory. So there may even be more than 40,000, but the message is that there is a percentage of low quality journals and predatory journals in both open access and subscription journals. And it's not a minor fraction in either case. So what is the cause of these predatory practices? Well, the cause, of course, is that you can earn a lot of money with publishing. And that has been started when Maxwell started the publishing business, more or less. And the journals that came out were there to earn money, but also do reviewing and do proper reviewing of science. And it deviated into a business of doing a lot of work letting be done by the researchers and publishing your journals and earn money with a high profit margin. And that attracts people who don't want to do all the work for the publishing the paper and just want to earn the money, which is a predatory practice. There is a lot of money behind it. Then the other thing is that there is a publish and perish or publish and perish culture. So many scientists really want to publish no matter where, to have something on their CV, to get promotion or whatever. And this pressure is also making the work that the predatory publishers do more interesting for them. So that is a very, those are just the main factors. And of course, you cannot really check if a journal does a proper peer review if you cannot see the peer review reports. So where are the predatory publishers situated? Subscription and open access, I want to emphasize. Well, Omix, well known, is in the United States. Well, they have of course in India seat as well. And there is SERP, which is in Southeast Asia. It's very difficult to find exactly out where they are. But OMIX and SERP are very good examples of predatory publishers with hundreds of journals. It's still an active publisher in both cases, and they attract a lot of authors. But in principle, you can find predatory publishers in the United States, you can find them in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in Asia, and in India. And perhaps there are a bit more of these outfits in India, but you cannot put the blame on one single country. So now talking about the problem in general, I do say there is a problem of predatory publishing, but the problem is, in my view, and the view of John Tennant, who's no longer with us, but we have published a paper, a blog, where we give our arguments that the problem of predatory publishing remains a relatively small one. And it should not be allowed to defame open access, which is what I want to say in this talk. I think it may just be misused to tell that subscription journals are the journals that you go to be safe, and that all the other journals are a bit suspicious, and that is not what we want. So I'd say, and John would say, the big publishers can really profit from the turmoil in the media about predatory publishing problem, and it just drives authors to their own journals. I don't say that they are behind the whole media hype, but we shouldn't exaggerate the problem. There is one example which I want to give, is that Shannon Björk is a famous paper about the proportion of predatory publishing. And they said that there were 8,000 journals and 420,000 articles in their study, while a person named Walt Crawford did the same with the same data, looked at the same data, and he found 3,000 journals publishing 120,000 articles, which is because the study by Shannon Björk was just done by extrapolating from small data sets, and Walt Crawford took the effort to look at every single field of data. So the thing that stuck was that there is 8,000 journals, 400,000 articles. Oh, and the problem is getting huge. But the problem was big, but not as big. So what can we do? What do I think about lists? Blacklists, we don't call them blacklists, certainly not in Africa. And we don't want to call them blacklists at all. We say predatory lists or something like that. Well, the famous Beals list disappeared and is being followed up by other list people. And we have K-Belts as a service for pay that gives predatory reports and lists of journals. What do I think about it? Well, I think with Cameron Nayland that blacklists or predatory lists are technically very difficult, practically very unreliable, unethical, and it is very easy to get listed on such a list and very difficult to get off such a list, which is the unethical part. And I would like you to think about, if you want to find a good hotel somewhere or a restaurant, what are you going to do? Are you going to look for a list of the bad hotels and waste your time? Think about that. So what about lists of good quality journals? That is the approach that the Directive of Open Access Journals take. We want to see that people go to the Directive of Open Access Journal list and can trust the journals there as not being predatory and of being good quality. And so the white list, or the good quality list, Scopus, Web of Science, Directory of Open Access Journals, and there is also a list by K-Belts. You can see that there is a difference in the listings. And the difference is that the Directory of Open Access Journals lists many, many more journals in other languages than English. and also from other parts of the world than Europe and the United States. I know that Scopus and Web of Science are mounting efforts to also list journals from elsewhere, but still there is a huge discrepancy between the lists. So the main thing might be that Scopus and Web of Science are putting an emphasis on metrics to judge the quality of journals, which we don't. How can we avoid predatory publishers and journals? Well, Susan is going to talk after me about combating predatory academic journals and conferences with guidelines and ways to do so, about the IAP report that appeared last week, Friday. Well, I said already, if you want to avoid predatory publishers, go and publish in a journal that is listed in the Directive Open Access Journals. And if you want to publish in a subscription journal, go to the Web of Science or Scopus to be more or less sure that you publish in a genuine journal. The other thing is that there is a journal evaluation tool, is one example of a librarian initiative that is also in my slide here. Then there is the journal checker tool, which checks all kinds of properties of journals regarding licenses and copyright and practices of publishing, which is a good thing, especially for funders, and it's meant to give information about compliance with Plan S. And of course, then we have Think, Check, Submit. Susan will talk about that as well. It is use your own head. Ask your colleagues, did you publish in that journal? Do you know that journal? Is it anywhere known, or is it just easy to publish in that journal and nobody knows how good it is? So ask around, think about it. Do you want to publish there? Ask your colleagues, check it, double, and only submit when you are sure. And then you can avoid a lot of predatory practices. So what are the signs, the warning signs, many of the warning signs of predatory journals? Well, look at predatory journals recruit fake editor. There was an investigation where a certain Dr. Fraud had submitted articles, and many of these, he was really put in an editorial boards of many journals as well, which is ridiculous, of course, but that is happening. One most important thing for predatory publishers is that they have a very wide scope. They spam authors and scientists to be editors or to publish with them. They have lists of fake impact factors, all kinds of metrics that show how good they are, or should show that they are very good. Non-acknowledged impact measures. Often there is very short review times, indicative of no peer review at all. The editorial board members, there is just names or names and universities, and sometimes universities you've never heard of. And there is shady business details like a location that you find out in Google Maps, and Street View has more to do with a Vietnamese food outlet than with scientific publishing. So there is really easy things to check as well, but also more difficult things, of course. Checking editorial boards is not the easiest thing to do. So what can we do to make it more difficult for the predatory publishers? What we can do is marginalizing the business that they have by better quality control. And better quality control is possible in open science. As John Tennant, which the name you may know, said, open science is just science done the right way. Then we can also marginalize it by open peer review and public peer review reports, because if predatory journals just want to publish quickly and do not have any willingness to do review, then they cannot produce review reports. And if they do, then you will see that the review reports are two phrases or just saying, well, it's a nice article, accept it, which is not a review, of course. So that can also discriminate the good ones and the bad ones. And of course, especially good is to say, share your experiences as an author, as an editor for such a journal. Don't be ashamed if you have been an editor for such a journal. Tell about your experiences. And I want to ask you after this presentation, if any of you in the audience can come forward and tell us a bit about your experiences as an author or an editor. Then my last advice would be use your head in the right way, not go for cheap tricks. And it's you are a scientist if you want to publish your science. Think, check, submit, and use your head. Don't fall into the trap of predatory publishing. So thank you very much. I hope that we can do now a bit of talking from you in the audience, giving us a bit of ideas on the practice of predatory publishing, your experiences.
So thank you very much, colleagues. I want to speak about a project that has been the actual report was launched yesterday, and the report was released last week Friday. And I think this is quite an important report for people on this call to actually take cognizance of, because it really unpacks this whole issue about predatory academic journals and conferences. So I'm also doing this presentation on behalf of our project director, Dr. Tracy Elliott of the Inter-Academy Partnership of Science Health Policy, as well as my working group members. So we have been quite a large group which investigated this whole problem around predatory academic journals and conferences. So this project was funded by the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, because we became quite aware of predatory journals and the problems that it poses to academics at large. And it was thought well through the proposal to actually start unpacking the different issues, because we realized that countries and the world as a whole did not have a very good grip on what actually is happening out there and how serious is it, and who does it influence and who's involved in this, and perhaps to offer some remedial actions for the system to actually combat predatory academic journals and conferences. So as I said, we were a very large group from South Africa right up to Sweden. And that includes South America, Arabic countries. As you can see from the pictures right there, South America, Ireland, etc., India. It was really a very interesting composition, and it represented quite a broad base of not only experts but also from country inputs, etc. So what were our study objectives? First of all, it was to define predatory and unethical practices in academic journals and conferences, and then to gauge the prevalence and the impact, and understand the primary drivers or the root causes, examine efforts to date to combat predatory journals and conferences around the world, and then to provide concrete recommendations for a global strategy to address the problem that engages all the key stakeholders. As you can see, we had quite a large group that we targeted, and we unpacked and we investigate each of those different sectors in our recommendations, etc. So what are our study outputs? It's worth your while. There's a summary report. The full report is on there. And I think it's quite important for you to go and have a look, especially at the full report, although the summary report does give you a very broad overview of what has happened. and what are our findings and our recommendations. But I must say that the full report actually unpacks everything quite nicely and neatly. This summary report has been translated in 5 languages. So it's English, Chinese, French, Spanish, and just for the sake of time, I must really think about the 5th language. I'm sorry about that, but it has been translated in the 5 sort of major languages worldwide. Yesterday was the report launch, and as Tom has reported back, I think at some stage we were about 400 participants in that webinar. So we're really trying to advocate and to raise awareness for this particular report. So what are the common features of predatory journals and conferences? And I just want to reiterate, I think some would be repetitive, what Tom has already said, and what we've already started experiencing in the chat boxes, and that is that they solicit articles from researchers through practices that exploit the researchers to publish and to present their work. So there's a lot of pressure on researchers. So the features include, but it's not limited, so this is really just a snapshot of what we found, is a rapid to pay, publish, present models without rigorous, and sometimes no peer review, which was of most concern. So there's fake editorial or conference boards, falsely listing respected scientists, fraudulent impact factors or metrics, and that is to lure the actual researchers to their journals, so be very careful. Journal and conference titles that are deceptively similar to legitimate ones. Aggressive spam invitations, there you go, to solicit articles and abstracts, including outside of a researcher's own expertise. So these genuinely fraudulent practices continue to evolve. They find new ways and means to actually just con the researchers into predatory journals. And it's sometimes very difficult to actually distinguish between low quality, unethical, and questionable publishing and conferencing practices. And I will say a little bit more about this particular point that I'm raising right here. So we started off with a literature review, and there are actually plenty out there which highlights this whole dilemma of predatory journals and predatory practices. And we got a very good overview of what's happening and what's being said and how it actually presents itself. Then we embarked on a study, a questionnaire, which would then inform our study. And it was sent out to, you can see right across the globe. And if you were one of the participants that completed this questionnaire, thank you very much. So the total participants in this questionnaire was 1,872. It represents 112 countries. And we found that over 80% perceive that predatory practices are a serious problem or on the rise in the country of work. So you can see the percentages right there. It was actually quite a bit mind-blowing of the overwhelming perception of the participants in our questionnaire. So what were the survey headlines? And I think this is very important. Researchers at all career stages need to be on their guard. And specifically researchers in low and middle income countries are most vulnerable. This is quite a thing that we, especially on our continent, in the Africa continent, in developing countries, must pay attention to. And then again, some disciplines are more vulnerable than others. Researchers in arts and humanities with predatory journals, and then very interesting, researchers in transdisciplinary and engineering sciences with predatory conferences. So that was quite a landmark in our study. At least 14% of respondents admit that they have used predatory journal or conferences. So we were really very adamant to translate that into financial implications as well, because we realized that some countries actually attach some accreditation systems to to the research output, and sometimes there is some monetary involvement as well. But if you just think about research grants and funding councils within countries, what is the implication for them? So this equates to almost 1.2 million researchers of the 8.8 million around the world who could have used predatory outlets. So this implies billions of dollars of research costs, people's, materials, time. So this really needs and requires urgent attention. At least 24 of those 24% respondents have either published in a predatory journal, participated in a predatory conference, or don't know if they have. And we asked them why did you do this? And they said, well, they were not aware at the time. And some said that they needed to advance their careers. Others said, well, it was faster, easier, or a much cheaper option. And lo and behold, that they were actually encouraged by their peers. So you can see by the answers, it is actually most alarming. And this speaks to the amount of advocacy we'll have to do. So if we unchallenge this, so the majority of respondents then believe that predatory practices will have detrimental effects. 82% said it has far larger implications. It will fuel misinformation in public policy. It will infiltrate and undermine the research enterprise and widen the research gap between high income and low income countries. And you can see the percentages there, they are quite high. So what are the examples out there? And Tom has very eloquently actually touched upon them. This is just to name a few of the tools that you can already use out there. Some of them are free and open. Some are actually subscription based. But I think there are quite a lot of free and open tools like ThinkCheck Submit or ThinkCheck Attend that can be used to actually check when you are approached by a probable predatory journal. Now, this is actually extremely important point. If we look at definitions in the literature, it very much focuses on just the actual actions of predatory journals. What is it that they do? This was quite a landmark for us in the study, is to realize that it's very difficult to actually define between a real predatory journal but a very low quality journal. And that poses a lot of problems. So we're raising the bar as such, is to put and to raise awareness to publishers, to motivate them to actually adhere to world-class standards and to follow code of best practices. If we look at the typical markers of very fraudulent predatory journals, you can see the whole list right there. Non-existent or improper peer review, mimicry of other journals, no or fake editorial board, alternative or fake impact factor, lies, hides the cost of publishing, potential illegal operations. Right to your right-hand side, we talk about typical markers for quality journals, but that even have in the quality journals some signs of perhaps low quality. So the typical markers for a very high quality journal: thorough peer review, strong editorial boards, robust system to ensure research integrity and retractions, clear about publishing costs, occasionally engages in predatory practices, but takes proper action when criticized. So you can see sort of the contrast between sort of groups of journals. And I think this is what we have to look at and to critically examine. And then right in the middle, where you have low quality or promising low quality and questionable quality journals, is low quality peer review, breaches of good editorial practice, services of authors and academia are lacking or poor, aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices, unclear about publishing charges, lack of satisfactory archiving, inactive editorial board. So you can just see the risk in going from those dots from bright red to green what the spectrum is of definition. And I think this is very important. What is the drivers or the root causes of these practices? We identified 3 prominent ones, and the one is the monetization and commercialization of the research sector, and pretty much what we've already been noticing in the question and answer boxes. It's including an academic publishing system whose proprietary and commercial interests may lead to conflict with research integrity, with the author-based models being especially prone to be abused, and we recognize that. Quantity over quality research evaluation systems. The lack of transparency, whether fully open, anonymized, or hybrid in the peer review process. So it's exacerbated by poor training, capacity, and recognition of peer reviewers. So I think this is quite significant in the report, and then with a recommendation as to how we should address it. So colleagues, that has really just been a little bit of a teaser that you're curious to go and read the report in full. And I thank you very much for your attention.